A big hello and a very warm welcome to Brand Equity with me, Sonali Krishna. Today, of course, as you can see, I'm in a completely different venue, not in the studio. I'm at Havas Worldwide India office, and I'm here to meet the man who's been hogging the limelight when it comes to making headlines. That's none other than Rana Barua, who's just been recently elevated as the Havas Group CEO, not only of India, but also Southeast Asia and North Asia. Pretty big mandate there for Rana Barua. Well, many congratulations, Rana.
Thank you.
Terrific, climb up in terms of your success story with Havas.
Thank you, Sonali.
And the last 5 years, about 5.5 now almost?
Yeah, 5 years and a few months, yeah.
Few months, yeah.
Yeah.
We've seen just a lot of action at Havas, something we've not seen before with this agency, rather this group. So first things first, what is your new mandate? India mandate we already know, but your new regions, what does that mean? How does your life change? And how does people's life change as they report into you?
So I think first and foremost for me personally, Ashley, it's something which is quite exciting. I'm really thrilled with the profile which kind of moves with India, moves into the entire Asia region, and these are like 9 very exciting markets. So, if you look at as a principle, you would probably think that how do you balance these markets if you're sitting out of India, which is what I'm doing. I'm going to be running all these markets out of India.
Also a first, I would say.
Yes, it's a first. Yeah, naturally, there is a normal tendency to move into the region, whether it's a Singapore, but Singapore will continue to be a very important domain for me and a very important region in parallel with India, because I think Singapore is in a way the gateway to all these markets. But I think what changes for how it was being run and what happens is that I think we were like kind of in a place of consolidation about how these markets will behave, what is the expertise that lies in these markets, how are we going to build these markets, do we go into through an alliance or do we get into some kind of affiliation or something. With me, naturally, with the kind of stories that has happened with India and the growth story that's happened in India, I may not necessarily replicate the whole thing into the region, because that's not what that's not what I've agreed with the global team. But what will definitely happen is that you're going to hear a lot more conversations of growth. You're going to hear a lot more conversations of what kind of mergers or acquisitions we look in certain markets. You're going to hear a lot of these agencies stroke expertise that's going to come into these markets, which is in India or globally they're available, which don't lie in these markets. So I think the exciting bit is it's close to 2,000 plus people, which is right there. India has 2,500 people. The region has around 2,000 people and 9 markets. So you're going to hear a lot more of conversations about what kind of growth is going to happen, which are the markets. Some markets are naturally getting prioritized about moving faster than the others. Some will remain in a form of being part of the global network, like Japan and South Korea is a must-have. You must have it as part of your global ecosystem, because a lot of global pitches, when they come out of US or UK, ask for these markets as part of your remit. So I need to consolidate those markets. But I'm seeing a lot of action happening out of Singapore in the coming definitely this year.
But why do you choose not to move countries and stick with Bombay as your base?
I think for me, naturally, I weighed those options, but I think India continues to be a big focus for us. India is officially in the top 10 markets of Havas, which means India will continue to be a massive engine of growth when you're getting ready for that kind of a journey. So India will remain my focus. India will remain a place where I will continue to consolidate, maybe expand a bit more, and it's in a way also what I realized that it's probably easier to manage the operations out of India when you can have one foot here and then also operate out of Singapore and then look at all those markets. So it's going to be split time between India and Singapore. So that's how I will see the other markets.
Okay. Rana, I just want to kind of, focus and zoom into the India market and just look at what's happened over the last 5 years or so. There's a lot of action happening at Havas, announcements here, there, and everywhere, every few days, right? But just to consolidate and give me a larger picture of what you're aiming to do in the Indian market. Of course, the fact that 5 years ago, Havas was just one agency that was just floundering to now becoming, a powerhouse of sorts. We've definitely seen that change. But if I just look at, what's happening within, and I'd like you to help me, kind of understand this entire network. Now we have the Havas Creative Network, which, has a lot of agencies. So you have Havas Worldwide, which is a creative agency. Then you have Conran, you have Havas People, Havas CX, Think Design, Showbiz, and now most recently with the acquisition of PR Pandit, you have Havas Red.
Yes.
So all of this is part of your creative network.
Yeah.
And they are not standalone different agencies.
In a way, they are a part of the creative network. They are standalone agencies in the form that they have their individual P&Ls because they're expertise driven, right?
Okay.
If you look at the names that you just mentioned, it's not like each mirrors the other. They don't. So it's not one creative network and another creative network. It's a creative network, which is Havas Worldwide. You have a PR expertise, which is the PR agency, which is PR Pandit. Then you have CX, which is a completely new vertical or a new network that gets formed, which is Havas Consumer Experience, which is very different from creative. Then you have Think Design, which is a UX UI specialist. So the point, and then Showbiz, of course, the events and activation agency. So these are specialist agencies that get clubbed under a creative network, and that forms the cluster for a creative network. Similarly, you will have a media network where you have the media agency. You have Pivot Roots, which was also acquired last year as a performance marketing agency. You have Havas Play, which is a specialist agency in culture, in entertainment, in sports. So, and then you will soon have a data agency called Havas CSA, which is launched globally. It's going to be launched in India very soon, which is CSA, which is about data and technology lying under Havas Media. But these are all independent specialists run by CEOs, run by MDs as verticals, but they get clubbed under a network, which is creative network and a media network. And the third one is what we call as the Havas Health and You, which also is going through a bit of a rebranding. But we do have an agency called Havas Life Sorrento, which also gets under Havas Health. These three then come together and report into me, and that's what I manage, which is Havas. And that's a direct model which is managed in most of the countries. So it's not something new for India. There's the same thing which is in Paris. This is what is there in New York. It's what there in, let's say, Spain and UK and everywhere. So we are probably, which is why when you club this and you say, oh, we are among the top 10 markets, is because all these markets have a similar model which says, how does Havas fit in? You have these cluster of agencies coming together.
Rana, just to break that down, I've got this creative, media, and health, right? But you said they all have separate verticals because it's all about expertise and each vertical is offering a different expertise.
Absolutely.
So you're not going into the model of having competing agencies like the old school model, right?
Yeah.
Having said that, let's say, does your creative agency network all come into the same P&L finally?
They come into the same P&L under Havas Creative Network.
Okay.
They do. So when I sum up all these numbers, naturally it's like, are they performing individually? How good are they? So excellence is driven by the individual companies.
Sure.
Their P&Ls then get clubbed together and it becomes a Havas Creative Network P&L.
Okay.
And then similarly for media, they may have separate P&Ls, but they club under Havas Media Network, and these two become separate P&Ls. Havas Health historically has been clubbed under Havas Creative Network P&L. So in a way, I am doing Havas Creative Network and Havas Media. They get reported into the global ecosystem. But finally, it becomes one P&L at Havas India level.
So essentially, as a holding company, I think there is a strategic move to get away with having multiple creative agencies.
Absolutely. Or if you look at that way, or multiple media agencies. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's the media agency will be one, creative agency will be one. If you need an expertise, you build around it. You don't duplicate it or unnecessarily have another one because you feel like having another one.
Do you see similar trends with other holding companies? Because every other holding company seems to continues with the model of, multiple creative agencies, using it for conflict businesses, all of that. How would you handle it?
I think that's the advantage of what Yannick has managed to do extremely well, because Yannick actually figured this village model in around 2013, and that's what we all know, that he figured out that there is a model called integration much earlier ahead of the curve, and he started building the model. And it allowed us to naturally do away with a lot of brands. To answer your question, do we have a model like this globally? And if you had to really push me, and I'll say, then what is BETC? BETC is an independent agency which lies outside Havas. So BETC actually has a separate P&L because BETC was culturally bought that way. It's not merged into Havas. So But does BATC exist everywhere? No, it exists only in France,
Sure.
in Brazil, and in China. That's it. There's nowhere else. They may expand into maybe in another country like New York or wherever they want to go, but that's it. We recently bought the Uncommon. Now, the reason why Uncommon was bought was not to prove or create any, kind of a challenge in the market. It was also very clear that the Uncommon had a very strong history of, in less than 5 years, they had become a very strong creative agency, right? So naturally, we've kept the Uncommon as a agency which sits outside Havas. So in globally, that if you had to ask,
It sits outside Havas, but it's still part of Havas.
it's a part of Havas, but it's not like it's not going to get merged into.
Got it.
It won't have a Havas, Uncommon or something. It's called the Uncommon. Now the point I'm trying to say is that these are one-off. If you see what I'm trying to explain to you, it's one Uncommon. It's not going to be uncommon across 40 countries.
Got it.
It's one BETC across 3 countries. And they're only there in the other 2 countries is because it's client-led.
Rana, what was the most recent acquisition you did was PR Pandit. What was the trigger to kind of get into the Havas fold, a PR agency?
So it was clear that, if you have a red network, which is doing extremely well in most of the countries, it's available in most of the countries. It had just launched in Dubai. We started seeing that it was doing well in most of the countries. India is a very strong agency, a country where PR plays a very important role. I think you'll agree on that we do believe in the power of PR. And I think a lot of big companies, use PR machinery very well in terms of communication, in terms of brands, in terms of engagement. And the thin line between, a lot of these conversations that we are seeing is that link between a PR and then a Havas people or a brand transformation or conversations are starting at maybe a CXO level. And we realized that this is something that we need because a lot of inquiries were happening globally when they were having these PR pitches out of many of these countries. Do you have an Indian presence? Sure. And that time we were naturally saying, okay, do you want we can have an affiliation with somebody or do you want we can think? So it was very clear 2 years back when we were looking out in the market that this expertise is required because this gap is very, very, and it's fueled by the country.
Okay, that's clear. That's clear to me. So I'm assuming now, if we just before I move on to the media networks, in your creative, repertoire of expertise that you're calling the, creative network agency, after Bobby Pavar's exit, who was your heavyweight personality, creative personality,
Sure.
Representing Havas, and I'm not sure whether things have changed in India, but we seem to be earlier a personality-driven
Sure.
kind of agency, especially in the creative realm.
Sure.
I don't see any heavyweight recruitment that
Yeah.
you have done post that.
Yeah.
Is that strategic as well?
It's strategic, very clear. There are 2 reasons to that because, if you see the way we are molded in most of the places, there are 2 things that happen. We have a global creative council, which is called the GCC, who kind of work across. Fortunately, we have a great guy in the region sitting out of Singapore called Joji Jacob. So after Bobby stepped down and he decided to go on his own because of his health reasons and all, Joji is now the regional chair. He doesn't look after India as a country because India reports into global directly. So we have Anupama sitting out of Havas worldwide, and the individual creative functions all have their creative heads. So what has happened is that it's been the mold fitted in very well. Because you're right that India is used to heavyweights, but we are also seeing a change out there.
Okay.
That clients are because with Piyush now retiring and then slow and steady, that there's a new breed of head of creatives who have come up, and
Yeah.
these guys are all individuals of their own right. I think probably these guys will grow up to become the next big names in the next few years. The business of ideas is about different from business of personalities.
So I have to ask you a fundamental question: wear your industry hat, right? You worked with WPP,
Yeah.
right? You've worked with Havas now. You worked for other agencies as well.
Sure.
You know the way the market played, right? And building agencies, whether it be creative or second agencies, was something that was the norm. If we look back and just look at what is happening right now in the industry across holding companies, a case in point being the very messy JWT Wonderman kind of merging, and then now VML, and now JWT now formally being called VML, all of that is happening. So we're seeing more and more people kind of come together. Would you say in hindsight, if you look back about 10, 15 years, this constant need to build new agencies was actually harmful for the industry at large?
I see, naturally now it's all, we are talking
hindsight.
Yeah, so now naturally it's easier to comment, and then maybe the reality was different. But I think, I personally, when I look back, I think it was also about how to keep certain high-ended, very talented personalities at bay. So you would create certain agencies, certain models, and ask them to set it up or create. Because if you see the number of agencies, let's say some holding companies had, and today when they are completely changing, if the question is that, do you think it makes sense? On my personal capacity or the professional capacity, I think it makes complete sense, because for a client, like I told you, is not looking at holding companies. The client doesn't look at what are the kind of agencies that you're bringing on the table, unless like you're a genuinely a very highly awarded agency. Like we can see the difference the Uncommon makes when it walks in. It's very different from the language we speak. Their entire behavior is different. The way they pitch, they don't go for pitches. Their entire behavior, and they've been successful. But for a holding company, naturally, it used to move from one P&L to the other P&L, one margin to the other margin. It didn't matter. Nobody's built a genuinely creative hot shop agency. You may say that yes, some of them have been winning awards, but it's not like a small 40-member boutique agency. When I mentioned BETC, the reason I mentioned BETC is because BETC is not a network agency. We don't call it a network agency. BETC is a Paris-based agency which has just walked into 2 markets because of clients. So one is, like I said, Sao Paulo, one is China. That's it. It's not going to be a network agency. So when I see this change that's happening and the consolidation that's happening, and if you look back at that 10 years back, I think that time that model worked because there were many clients.
Sure.
There were many different personalities. There were many clients who were happy to be with separate agencies. But look at the funny part. They were all under maybe the same network.
Yeah.
Or the holding company, as you called it.
Yeah.
So it was probably the holding company which was managing this. But I'm not sure it was the best of operations or the most cost effective or the most profitable operations at that time, because things have changed. And I can see that the reason for consolidation is prima facie that.
There's a new trend also that's taking place with clients, specifically big clients. For instance, Coca-Cola and the likes of that, where there are special purpose vehicles being made by holding companies in terms of servicing it completely, right? So then you're just hiving off that and making that completely dedicated to that one big client globally. How is that model working? Do you see potential in more such, vehicles, special vehicles being created for big brands globally, and is that a profitable model? I think
it's absolutely a very, very profitable model. Absolutely, there goes without saying that, because what you're basically doing is that a brand like Coke across so many parts of the world, the way you can only probably work is creating that, whatever it's called, the team, whatever it's called. I think it makes complete sense, because that's how it should work. It synergizes the operations. It makes it simpler to get things done. It's easier to manage. Global brands are probably the most difficult to manage. I can tell you that. We've got a few of them. If you keep it open, it gets into a lot of confusion and mess. So I think sometimes creating a model like this, and especially clients must buy that, because remember, it doesn't come cheap. So whoever is building this model is naturally making it, because when you go into a global agency model and you have individual agencies of that network managing it, it's easier, just more in terms of cost. But this is something which naturally makes it a more expensive model, because the client is ready to invest in talent. Remember, when you're building an agency model, you're buying talent, you're investing in talent, you're saying, I know what is going to be which country, who's going to be doing what. Correct. So naturally, it's a big leap of faith from both sides. But I think it's absolutely worth it. Absolutely worth it.
Okay, coming to some of the global trends we're seeing, if you look at the recent slew of quarterly results that came out, most of the holding companies have reported weaker than expected organic revenue, especially because of the spending cuts from tech and telecom.
Sure.
And this we are going to see even further, because we're seeing tech in a bit of a year of efficiency. They call themselves year of efficiency, so it's going to be a little tough for them to keep spending, and that impact will be directly seen on different holding companies. How is that looking in terms of going forward? People are talking about a lot of headwinds for the advertising industry as clients slow down their spending, become more cautious, lots of macroeconomic factors in play. Are you seeing for advertising per se a bit of a rough road ahead?
If you're classically in a format which is going to be dictated by advertising or communication or creative or just media, when I'm saying means without names, naturally it's going to have a heavy toll on you, because if the market slows down, spends go down, communication spends go down. It's a direct correlation. But if you look at the ecosystem, which is where the ecosystem of agencies come in play, if you look at the reason why, let's say, we have been doing well over the last few quarters, or at least the last few years, I'm not talking about only India here, overall. If you look at the way we've been working, it's the expertise which is starting to move forward. You may have a very large office in New York, which is probably doing phenomenally well, but there are other expertise which is doing extremely well. So we have Gate One, for example. It's a very, very high-end brand consulting end-to-end model, it's an acquired agency in UK, which was bought, is probably one of the most high performers of the group in our company. I think that's where the difference of a holding company and this idea I was telling you about, what Yannick had kind of thought about as a integration and a village model of this expertise-based agencies versus agency-based model. If you look at expertise, you have Conrad, which is probably doing extremely well, which is a design agency model. If you look at Gate One, which is doing well, if you look at Havas CX, which is a completely different agency model, these then become quite agnostic to your entire clients and spend, because clients will use them. Clients will spend money on consulting if they're going through a brand transformation. They may be spending money less than Havas Creative, but they're upping their money onto Gate One. They may spend lesser money in media, but they may spend more money on doing a complete new architecture design with Conrad. I think for us, we are seeing a lot of two things we are seeing. One is these expertise numbers where we are seeing a lot of growth, and I think I was trying to explain to you how regions play a very important role then. So for example, Asia has become a very strong growing region for us. LATAM has played a very strong resurgence where a lot of conversations of growth is coming from LATAM. So that's the other model for us. And I think we were recently in a global review with Yannick on certain things and all. We saw that, we are naturally in a very strong and a stable position. And I think we pride in ourselves being a challenger brand, which makes it, very easier in terms of our mentality about how do we attack a problem. We actually don't get fettered sometimes. Of course, you don't feel good when you lose a pitch. Of course, you don't get kicked, but nobody gets fettered. Oh my God, okay, end of the world. Because if you look at my agency structure, which I just described, it's not one vertical of a creative. I can create a model which has got 9 extra expertise. So for me, let's say last year, if you asked me, which was your highest performing agency in the creative network, it wasn't the creative network, the creative agency. It was Showbiz. Okay. It did phenomenally well because events and activation in India is doing well. If you look at my media agency, Pivot Roots, phenomenally well. They're doing so well. So if you look at PR Pandit, look at what I'm talking to you versus a classical conversation of how's my creative agency doing and how's my media. It's like, I was again explaining to somebody that if you look at the model of Apple, is it the phone? Is it the watch? Is it the iPad? Is it the movies that you're buying on Apple app? Is it this? It's an ecosystem. Yeah. As a consumer, what are you buying into? Finally, the numbers come and become Apple, right? Yeah. So you're through a laptop suite. So for me, if I had to do a parallel business model, I'm trying to get you through whichever way, and then finally. And then, of course, I have to individually focus on that. It can't be that the guy who's selling Apple Watch, sells it 5 times more than a laptop, and the laptop is not selling it. No, that's not going to happen. That's for him. It's a business. So I think that's the difference we are building.
You've done a definite makeover for Havas in India, right? So if now I ask you, after about 5.5 years of work, right? If you compare Havas in India to other holding companies in India, where in the pecking order are you?
I would say we are in the top 4. I'm quite confident about it, because if I keep the top 3 aside, who naturally historically have been very strong, very aggressive.
Let me name them. I would say WPP, Omnicom, and IPG.
I would probably say it's WPP, Publicis.
Sorry, WPP, Publicis,
IPG.
and IPG.
Yeah.
Oh, you've dropped Omnicom off. Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Okay, and you've got, so you're saying now Havas.
And Havas, yeah.
Okay. So that's a reasonable climb up.
Absolutely.
A reasonable
Yeah,
climb
and I'm
up.
quite confident about it because it's not like I have the figures of other companies and all. We have a fair idea of where the others would be. And like I said, if you had all these, because of this 18, 19 vertical stroke expertise that we have, and then if you look at the overall growth trajectory, we've been growing phenomenally. Even if I can't give you absolute numbers and all, it's been about 35% growth year on year. So that's crazy.
You've maintained 35% growth?
Yeah, it's more. So even this year, it's going to be far more than that.
You're talking about revenue?
I'm talking revenue.
Revenue.
Yeah.
Okay. And if in that, how would you gauge your media versus creative? Because traditionally, media has always been, stronger in terms of contribution.
So again, it's the media network versus the creative network,
Absolutely.
right? So it's not me. Because if you had done a media creative, then it's naturally absolutely very different.
Yeah.
Yes, then it's media by far. But if I look at it as a media network and a creative network, then I can say that when we started the journey, naturally media was maybe much bigger, maybe 70-30 or whatever. It's now 55-45. So 55 media, 45 creative.
And you're hoping to bridge that gap.
I think it will. I think it will probably become closer to 50-50. Yeah, because there are some more conversations coming up in the creative network.
So you've been on a shopping spree, Rana. We've seen that. Is the shopping list over, or are we going to see you, shopping a lot more?
We have a few gaps left. I know that.
What are those white spaces?
So I think the white spaces remain in consulting, definitely.
Okay.
I'm very, very kicked about Gate 1. So I'm hoping if Gate 1 comes into the scene, excellent, or we will figure out how to start the process of at least ensuring that we have a consulting model, which I'm quite keen on getting on place. I'm definitely looking for a classical social media digital agency, which is strong in digital agency, which is creative, digital, adaptive, because we don't have one. And I'm being very frank about it. We have a strong creative agency maybe, but you definitely need a backbone of a digital agency, something similar to like we got a performance marketing agency. People have asked me, can you build it from scratch? Yes, you can, but you can't ramp it up. You can't scale it up. When you go for some very large scale pitches, the first thing a client asks, so tell me about your digital offering. You can't then show 10 people. You need to show a full-fledged agency at work, 25 cases, all that. So I think that's a clear gap for us. I think we are talking about something in CX, consumer experience. So definitely something in MarTech. Okay. We are looking at that in a serious way. But that will not just be for India. Might be India, maybe region, maybe for a global ecosystem, because that our technology specialists are, it's world. They're appreciated by the world.
Sure.
And I think something in Havas people also. So if you see the spree continues, but it's now slow and steady. So I think globally they're quite happy with where we've reached. I think for us, naturally, it's about maybe getting those one or two more tick boxes. Otherwise, we are in a zone where we should be able to, keep growing with what we have.
Sure. Last question before I let you go. What is this current client sentiment you're seeing in India specifically? Are you seeing some kind of slowdown in the spending? I know it's a big election year, so we'll see a lot of spending definitely by the government.
Yeah.
And of course, we have our annual IPLs and all of that.
Exactly.
Right? But apart from these tentpole events, are you generally seeing a more cautious marketer today?
I think what I'm definitely picking up is that because of the stability that continues to come from the top because of a strong, stable government. And if you see the recent figures that they've just told us about the Q1 figures, they're already saying that, Q4, which is the end of the financial year, they're already up the numbers. So I think we are going to probably remain at a very strong and steady growth. I'm not going to see client sentiments dip. You'll find categories having challenges, which is a common phenomenon. Certain challenges will continue, but I think the growing economy is not slowing down for us.
Many congratulations again on your elevation, and more power to you.
Thank you so much,
as
Sonali.
you capture those markets and make them succeed. And here's looking forward to a lot more news coming in from the Havas table in India. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sonali.